We got nailed with smoke yesterday in Texas, originating from the California wildfires. Looking a lot better this afternoon, but checking out the high-resolution rapid refresh smoke model, quite a bit of it persists across the central states, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, still seeing hazy skies. The surface map for this afternoon shows tropical air redeveloping across Texas and flowing northward into Nebraska. We've got this series of nested fronts, one from the southeastern U.S. where it's dissipating, and further out to the west, we've got more of an active frontal system. You can see the temperatures back behind that front in the 70s in the Great Basin region, and that's about 20 to 25 degrees colder than we've been seeing it over the past few weeks. So that definitely represents a much cooler air mass in place, and we also see the northerly component to the wind flow in that region. In Arizona, the monsoon has abated a little bit. Clear skies returning to the desert regions in that area, and temperatures coming up quite a bit. You may remember back on Wednesday, thermal California got up to 122. That broke their all-time record for August, and we can see that the temperatures are coming down a little bit. And then further up to the north, we have a much more active frontal system that's centered in Alberta, stretching eastward towards Minneapolis and Lake Superior, and the western periphery of that front back towards Seattle. It does look cool in that region around Seattle, but the heat is going to be cranking up in that region next week. Cold air has returned to much of Canada. We can see two cold domes, the major one across Baffin Island and Hudson Bay. That's outlined by the thickness contours that you see in red right here, and we also outline a secondary cold dome across the western high Arctic that's centered over Banks Island and extends out across the Brooks Range. Now, even though we do have those cold domes, you can see that over Newfoundland and Labrador, some very warm temperatures, 84 at Goose Bay and 84 around Gander. And then further back westward across Alaska, we've got this warm sector, temperatures near 70 in that part of Alaska, and an active frontal system centered around the Nome, Alaska region. Looking at the 300 millibar chart up in the upper troposphere, yeah, we do have a jet along the Arctic coast coming down into Quebec. There's the main polar vortex across Baffin Island. However, it does look like we have a little bit of cold air aloft, a little bit of a vortex across the western high Arctic. Further to the south, we can see a weaker jet stream right here. Kind of hard to pick that out, maybe kind of split up. However, that is associated with the southern frontal systems, and we can see further out to the west a much stronger jet stream, and that's likely going to result in frontogenesis in western Canada over the weekend. The surface charts show that whatever develops in that part of Canada should rapidly lift to the northeast. You can see that moving up there into the Hudson Bay region, and we've got this very long fetch of warm air coming from the central U.S. And then into next week, we have a new frontal system developing in the high plains right there. It undergoes frontalysis by Tuesday and Wednesday, and it looks like maybe some of the energy ends up again into the Hudson Bay region. So it looks like kind of a quiet pattern coming up for the U.S. next week. The 500 millibar chart in the mid-troposphere is a great tool this time of year because it's very sensitive to the development of heat domes. Now, what we see here is kind of an absence of that. We look for the subtropical highs. We have one east of Florida, but actually what we see is a progressive westerly pattern across the U.S., divided into a couple of medium-scale troughs. Now, there is a ridge across New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, Texas. That's going to be a medium-scale ridge, and that's going to be responsible for maybe 1 or 2 days of very hot weather. However, that's a transitory pattern, and it should move eastward, so that's not really going to be associated with prolonged periods of hot weather. What we look at is the large-scale patterns, such as this lobe of the subtropical high. That's pretty far to the south, though, but that's more of a semi-permanent feature. So what's that going to do over the next week or two? Let's move the maps forward, going into the weekend and into next week. Well, we do see that subtropical ridge is sort of remaining in place, but the center of it remains off the coast of Florida. However, there's just enough ridging in here to make me suspect we're going to see lots of 90s in the Gulf Coast region. Not much of a weakness in that ridging. So, in fact, that ridge kind of builds in. You see the appearance of the 594 decameter line next Tuesday. That's going to be located right around here. So we've got the subtropical high building into the southeastern U.S., and we'll want to keep an eye on what happens out in the Pacific Northwest, because they are going to get the heat, and we can see right there 594 decameter high building in. And what we saw across Oregon, Idaho, Washington, British Columbia back in late June was associated with a 597 decameter height line. So this is getting up into the same sort of territory. I don't think we're going to see 120s, but we could see 90s and some 100s in this region outlined here. And then for the rest of the country, some of that ridging will build into Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and much of the Central Plains. So I'd expect the heat to come up. And we also see a return to easterlies in Texas around late next week. So more of a tropical pattern coming up and less of the 60s dew points and fair weather. In getting to the very end, looks like a little disturbance off the Carolinas around the 16th. This is getting pretty far out there. This is a trough that could be associated with an MCS in the northeastern U.S. And around the 19th or 20th, the ridge axis runs from Nevada to Georgia, so very likely a lot of hot weather across the southern half of the U.S. NHC indicating a couple of potential development areas from the Cape Verde Islands almost to the Windward Islands. They've got a 0% chance of formation, so this doesn't look great as far as development. But it looks like a 20% chance of formation over 5 days, and this one further out to the east has a little bit more potential, but we can already see recurvature possibly being a factor. So I would say for the next week or two, it does look quiet in the Gulf of Mexico region and around Florida. SPC is showing a slight risk in the high plains, western South Dakota into eastern Wyoming, associated with that frontal system that's up in that area. Already got a severe watch box out for that region, and most likely the threats with that are going to be high winds and maybe a little bit of small hail. The visible satellite imagery shows storms forming on the Bighorn Range of northern Wyoming and additional storms forming afterwards on the Laramie Range. And there they are. And also the Black Hills, not exempt either. So orographics, a big factor in today's storms. And we can see further out to the west, a lot of smoke being wrapped up into this pattern. Even between the storms, you can see kind of a brownish tinge. So I guess if you were out chasing, trying to get some storm action, it would be kind of tough with a hazy situation out there in Wyoming. And those wildfire problems in California, Oregon, and the smoke in Nevada, this is how things looked yesterday. We had storms forming in the higher terrain of Oregon and far northern California. You can see some CBs going up. Now the salt fire near Mount Shasta appears to be somewhat contained, but you can see the storms going up over the higher terrain, and my guess is that the winds and lightning associated with those storms probably sparked that fire once again. You can see a lot of brown plume coming off of that area, and also the Dixie fire looks like that one's also having trouble as well. And if we roll this forward into the evening hours yesterday, a lot of smoke and anvil material, and then we see the infrared signature, the hot spots on the infrared channel. And going into this morning, lots of smoke, especially over Nevada. Man, just vast amounts of that. And looks like the smoke is a little bit better for this afternoon, so that's certainly some good news. And back to the bad news, the persistent heat wave continuing across Greece and Turkey. Not quite as bad as what we had a few days ago, but still we are hitting almost 100 degrees there around Athens and 102 on the west coast of Turkey. Bring this up another hour and you can see Athens hitting that 100-degree temperature. And the bad news is going into the next week or so, that heat is going to continue. We're going to see probably a whole lot more news about fire problems in Greece and Turkey. You can see yesterday a couple smoke plumes across Greece and southwestern Turkey. However, today, a lot of clouds across the region, but more wildfires popping up in Greece. And they could really use a break from that. So these are going to be the temperatures on Saturday in terms of records. And we see temperatures coming close to records, but not really breaking them in Las Vegas and Phoenix. So it will be hot around there, but we're not expecting the day's records to be broken. It should be pretty mild. And for Sunday, things heating up in New Mexico and southern Colorado. Albuquerque coming up to 97 within a degree of their record for the date, and Alamosa coming up to 87. And that's also going to be within 1 degree of the record for the date. And you can see on Monday, things drift eastward. Borger, Texas, just north of Amarillo, expected to come up to 104, which will break the record for the date, and some very hot conditions elsewhere from Amarillo up to Colorado Springs and back towards Alamosa and Albuquerque. And I would show you the record lows, but there's just not going to be really any of those. One little 51 there around Fort Bragg, or actually Arcata, for Monday morning, and that's it. So we're kind of in a warm weather pattern. Here's how things look in the desert southwest this afternoon. You can see it is quiet. Most of the storms concentrated on the Mogollon Rim and over the higher elevations of southeastern Arizona. It will be kind of quiet around Sunday, but Monday we're going to expect the monsoon to be picking up just a little bit and edging westward into the Mojave Desert, and that could bring more showers across the mountains east of San Diego and Los Angeles. As we mentioned, not very much going on in Texas. Looks like the sea breeze is trying to get established down there southwest of Houston, but we're not really locked into that sea breeze pattern just yet. That could be coming for tomorrow, but that will depend a lot on the strength of the mid-level ridge. The Gulf Coast region showing some unsettled weather along the tail end of that decaying stationary front, and we do see the appearance of some stronger upper-level winds due to the presence of westerlies. And there they are right there, helping to improve the bulk shears in that region. And the Gulf Coast itself, yeah, the sea breeze showing up, but not doing very much. And that's partly due to the presence of ridging down in this region. A quiet pattern for Virginia and Maryland. A little bit of northeasterly flow still coming in. That's drier air. And, of course, we have the boundary further down to the south. So that's giving this region a fair day. And most of the clouds are confined to the Appalachians. Further north, well, we start picking up some of the southwesterly flow on the west side of the surface high. And with that, a little bit of moderate to towering cumulus here and there, but overall, we don't really have the moisture in place just yet. Storms are going up in the Maritimes, in the extreme eastern parts of Quebec. I don't know if anybody's tried storm chasing up there, but yeah, there's a few storms for you to look at along that cold front which is coming out of central Quebec. In the Midwest region, we're seeing storms firing north of Madison and north of Milwaukee. That's them right there. Appears there's a somewhat unresolved boundary in that region. The surface map did show a front in that area. It's possible it snuck a little bit further south, but those storms are taking place right in here, and that's near the nose of the moisture coming up from the southwest. There's the situation on the high-resolution rapid refresh showing the dew points. The purples are going to be 70s dew points, and you can see the southwesterly flow. If we take a look at these soundings across southern Wisconsin, there's your parcels. There is dry air off the surface, and that's going to dampen some of the storm prospects. We don't really have good moisture depth, even though at the surface itself, yeah, they're up to 70s dew points. The decape's sitting at about 700, so that's going to be sort of moderate. So some outflow interaction is likely, and also very weak shear. Only a little bit of 30 to 40 knot shear up there at the top of the diagram near 30 to 40,000 feet. Bulk shear is not very impressive, and low-level shear, you have to use a magnifying glass on that 0 through 1 kilometer plot. So we just don't really have a lot of good ingredients for severe weather. As we move westward, we get into some of that smoke. Now, we did cover earlier the stuff in Wyoming, and we can see some storms even as far north as the Jordan area. And then focusing on Oregon and Washington, looks like some of that cool air, the marine air infiltrating the Cascades, and we are expecting the heat to come up. Let me show you the model graphics. So there's the 850 millibar temperature anomaly for this afternoon. You can see some downslope effects there in Alberta, and we can also see that cool air mass infiltrating the Great Basin area. There's the residual cold air across the southern U.S. That's quickly eroded as we get heating and warm air advection. And then going into next week, let me just run this up, and we're going to focus on this area up here. It does look like a cold front is moving through Montana, but that's just kind of a temporary improvement in the weather. As we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, you can see the heat starting to come up in Washington and Oregon. This is going to be about Tuesday afternoon. And going into the last half of the week, the temperature anomalies get even worse, especially around Seattle, Vancouver Island, Portland. So we're going to see some very hot temperatures returning once again. So mostly 90s, but possibly some 100s. What is that there? All right, so that'll probably do it for this evening. Hope you enjoyed the weathercast, and we'll see you all again on Monday for the supporters and Wednesday for everybody else. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.